Miami was more than just a city, it was the rhythm of my life, the vibrant pulse that matched my own. My name is Ava Thompson, and at 25 I felt like I had it all, or at least the blueprint for it. My apartment, a cozy space near Coconut Grove, had just enough room for my growing collection of art supplies and the stack of cookbooks I rarely used. My days were a blur of designing social media campaigns for a boutique marketing firm, a job I genuinely loved, and my evenings were usually spent with Daniel. Daniel. The name used to feel like sunshine on my skin, a warm embrace that promised forever. We'd been together for 7 years, practically since high school. He was 2 years older, a finance guy with a quick wit and a smile that could disarm anyone, especially me. Our life was a comfortable routine of weekend beach trips, lazy Sunday brunches, and late-night talks about our future. We had plans, real plans, a little house with a garden, maybe a golden retriever, and definitely 2 kids. Our engagement ring, a delicate sapphire surrounded by diamonds, felt like a physical manifestation of those dreams. It sat on my left hand, a constant, sparkling reminder of the path we were on. Then 2 months ago, the world stopped spinning, Daniel confessed. Not in a dramatic, tear-filled scene, but with a quiet, defeated tone that was far more chilling. He'd been seeing someone else, another woman, for a few months, he mumbled. The words were a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The details were hazy, fragmented pieces of a nightmare. Late nights at the office, business trips that stretched a day too long, a new scent on his clothes I'd dismissed as a client's perfume. I remembered trying to be understanding, trying to piece together the narrative, but all I could feel was the cold, hollow ache of betrayal. The engagement was off, the ring returned, and Daniel was gone, leaving behind only the ghost of our shared future and the crushing weight of disappointment. I tried to move on. I threw myself into work, spent more time with my best friend Chloe, and even attempted online dating, though each profile felt bland compared to the vivid history Daniel and I shared. The wound was still fresh, a raw, exposed nerve, but I was healing slowly. I was learning to breathe again without the constant pressure on my chest. Then the phone rang. It was Daniel, 2 months of silence broken by his voice, hesitant and a little hoarse. My heart did that familiar, unwelcome lurch. Ava, he started, his voice barely above a whisper, I need to talk to you, it's important. A jolt of something I couldn't quite identify, dread mixed with a sliver of hope. A desperate, foolish thought that maybe he'd realized his mistake, that he wanted me back. Foolish, I knew that even as the thought flickered. What is it, Daniel? My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the chaos inside me. It's about her, the other woman. He paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. She's pregnant. The world tilted again. Pregnant. My mind reeled. Pregnant. This was a new level of hell. I'd imagined many scenarios for his return, an apology, a plea, maybe even just a casual check-in. But never this, never a child. And I managed, my voice strained. And she doesn't know if it's mine or someone else's. My breath hitched, the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall. He was coming to me, the woman he'd betrayed, to help him sort out a paternity crisis with the woman he'd cheated on me with. A bitter, incredulous laugh escaped my lips. Are you serious, Daniel? Ava, please just hear me out. We need to figure this out. She's saying it could be mine, and if it is, I need to know, for everything we had, for the years. His voice cracked, a plea for sympathy I wasn't prepared to give. Despite the anger bubbling inside me, a strange, morbid curiosity took hold. I wanted to see the extent of this mess. I wanted to witness the unraveling. Maybe, just maybe, deep down, a tiny part of me still wanted closure, a final, definitive end to this chapter that had haunted me for months. Fine, I said, the word a struggle. Meet me at that cafe, the one near the park, in an hour. The cafe, the daily grind, used to be our spot. We'd spent countless afternoons there, planning our wedding, dreaming about our future. Now, sitting across from him, the small table between us felt like an ocean. Daniel looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, and his shoulders slumped. He looked older, gaunt, a shadow of the vibrant man I'd loved. He started talking, his voice low, recounting dates, timelines, desperate to piece together a puzzle he'd shattered. She says she conceived around early June, he mumbled, consulting his phone. And I was with her then. But also this other guy, Mark, was apparently around that time too. I listened, my expression neutral, my mind a whirl of calculations. Early June. I remembered a weekend trip Daniel had taken with his buddies then, a fishing trip he'd insisted I couldn't come on. It was then, wasn't it? The first time he'd really lied to me, created a whole elaborate story. The pieces were falling into place, a grim mosaic of deceit. When was your last time together? I asked, forcing the words out. It felt clinical, detached, like I was an investigator, not a heartbroken ex. He looked up, meeting my eyes, and for the first time I saw genuine shame, not just exhaustion, on his face. Before I told you everything. End of May. My brain, honed by years of project management, quickly processed the data. So if she conceived in early June and your last time with her was end of May. I let the words hang in the air. The implication was clear. It wasn't his. Or at least it was highly, highly unlikely. A tiny, perverse sense of relief flickered, quickly replaced by renewed anger. He dragged me here, made me listen to the sordid tale, only for the calendar to deliver the truth. His eyes widened as the realization dawned on him. He stared at his phone, then at me, then back at his phone, as if hoping the dates would magically rearrange themselves. His face crumpled. It's not mine, is it? He whispered, his voice barely audible. I simply shook my head, my gaze unwavering. There was no triumph in my heart, just a deep, abiding disappointment. Not for him, but for the person I'd believed him to be, for the future I'd so carefully constructed, only for him to tear it down so carelessly. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. Then he pushed his chair back abruptly, a scraping sound against the tiled floor. Without another word, he stood up and walked out of the cafe, leaving me alone with the ghosts of our past and the bitter taste of a future that would never be. He didn't look back. And for the first time in a long time, neither did I. I went home, the silence of my apartment amplifying the turmoil within me. The rage simmered, a low, dangerous heat beneath my skin. How could a man who claimed to love me, who had given 7 years of my life, to throw it all away in a matter of months? And then to have the audacity to come back, not with remorse for his betrayal of me, but for his own precarious situation with another woman. The numbness I'd felt after our breakup was gone, replaced by a searing, crystalline anger. There were no tears left, only a cold, hard resolve solidifying in my core. I was contemplating making a strong cup of coffee when my phone rang again. It was Daniel's grandmother, Maria. Maria was an institution, a formidable woman with a heart of gold and a temper like a Florida thunderstorm. She had practically raised Daniel after his parents moved overseas for work when he was young. She loved me like her own granddaughter. My stomach clenched, she must know. Ava, my darling, her voice, usually warm and comforting, was sharp, laced with an unfamiliar fury. What have you done? Daniel just left here a wreck. He says you're blaming him for something that isn't his fault, that you're being irresponsible, that you refuse to help him in his time of need. How could you abandon him like this after all these years? He's distraught, Ava, absolutely distraught. The accusations hit me like a barrage of stones. Irresponsible, me? The woman he'd cheated on, the one whose life he'd upended. I felt a laugh bubble up, harsh and without humor. This was a new low. He hadn't just walked out, he'd gone home and spun a tale, painting himself as the victim, me as the heartless villain. The betrayal deepened, twisting into something truly grotesque. Maria, I began, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He told you that? He told you I was irresponsible. He said you were cruel, Ava, that you refused to help him determine paternity, that you just walked away when he needed you most. He said you were heartless. Her voice rose, her anger escalating. After everything he's done for you, after all the love he's given you, how could you be so cold? My mind raced. This was classic Daniel. Manipulative, twisting the narrative to suit his own ends, always playing the innocent party. But this time it wouldn't stand. Not when it involved Maria, the woman who had always treated me with such kindness and respect. The woman who deserved to know the truth. Maria, I said, my voice gaining strength, each word deliberate, I need you to listen to me. Daniel came to me today because the woman he cheated on me with is pregnant, and he doesn't know if it's his or another man's. I helped him look at the dates. The baby is not his, he knows that now. He was here asking for my help, not seeking forgiveness, not showing remorse for breaking my heart, but to solve his problem, a problem he created by cheating. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. The Florida thunderstorm seemed to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, heavy calm. Pregnant, Maria whispered, the word barely audible. Another woman, Daniel, cheated on you? Her voice was laced with disbelief, then a growing horror. Yes, Maria, he cheated on me. That's why we broke up 2 months ago. He never told you, did he? Another long pause. No, she finally said, her voice hollow. He told me. He told me you two just grew apart. He said you decided you weren't ready for commitment. A bitter smile touched my lips. Of course he had. The lies just kept piling up, a house of cards he'd built, and now it was starting to crumble. He lied to you, Maria. He lied to all of you. He had an affair, and now he has this pregnant woman. He came to me to clear his name, to make sure this baby wasn't his, so he wouldn't have to face the consequences. Oh, Daniel, Maria murmured, the strength gone from her voice, replaced by a deep sadness. My sweet boy, what has he done? He's made a mess, Maria, and then he came to me, the person he betrayed, to clean it up. And when the truth came out, he ran home and twisted the story to make me look like the villain. My voice was firm, resolute. I'm coming over, Maria. I'm going to tell you and Daniel's uncles and aunts everything, the whole truth, because you deserve to know. A soft, shaky sigh on the other end. Come, Ava, please, we need to talk. I hung up the phone, a strange sense of purpose settling over me. The numbness was gone, the disappointment was gone, all that remained was a cold, hard anger and a burning desire for justice. Daniel had played his hand, and he'd played it poorly. He had tried to manipulate the narrative to save face, but he had underestimated me. He had underestimated the strength of my character, the loyalty of his family, and the power of truth. The game had just begun, and this time I was playing to win. This was not about tears or sadness anymore. This was about poetic revenge, about making him face the consequences of his actions, not just with the other woman, but with the people who mattered most to him. With the family he'd lied to, and with the woman he'd destroyed. He wanted to turn off his brain. I was going to make sure he couldn't sleep for weeks. The Miami sun used to feel like a warm embrace, a constant promise of joy and endless possibility. For years it had, especially when Mark was by my side. I'm Ava Thompson, 25 years young, and Miami has always been home. It's where I grew up, where I dreamed of forever, and where those dreams eventually crumbled into dust under the weight of a silence that screamed louder than any argument. Mark and I, we were a story. 7 years etched into the very fabric of my being. We met in high school, just kids, clumsy with first love, convinced we had found our soulmates before we even knew what the word truly meant. Our families, what was left of mine anyway, had always adored him. My grandma Rose, bless her heart, treated him like the grandson she never had. My uncles, stern and protective, would let their guard down around him. He was integrated, a part of our chaotic, loving Cuban-American clan. He was supposed to be my future. But somewhere along the way, the vibrant colors of our life together started to fade. It wasn't a sudden storm, more like a slow, creeping drought. We moved in together, a cute little apartment in Coral Gables, just enough space for us and our dreams, or what was left of them. The laughter became less frequent, replaced by the clinking of dishes and the drone of the television. Conversations dwindled to practicalities: who would pick up groceries, whose turn it was to pay the internet bill. The intimacy, once a roaring fire, became a dying ember, barely clinging to life. I tried. Oh, how I tried. I'd suggest date nights, weekend getaways to Key West, even just a walk on the beach at sunset, something we used to do instinctively. But his responses were always the same: a shrug, a tired sigh, a mumbled excuse about work or being too tired. It felt like I was constantly pulling, dragging a dead weight, while he remained firmly rooted, unmoving. The man I loved, the man I'd given 7 years of my life to, was slowly, subtly slipping away. He was present physically, but his spirit, his affection, his very presence felt absent. I started to feel invisible, like a ghost haunting my own life. I'd look at myself in the mirror, searching for the vibrant girl he once adored, but all I saw was a shadow, her light dimming with each passing day. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant pressure behind my ribs. I yearned for connection, for someone to truly see me, to listen, to care. Mark, my fiancé, was supposed to be that person, but he was. Then came Leo. He wasn't a knight in shining armor, not some grand romantic gesture. He was just there. A new colleague at the marketing firm where I worked, quiet, observant, and with a way of looking at me that made me feel seen for the first time in what felt like forever. He'd actually listen when I spoke, ask follow-up questions, remember details I'd casually mentioned. It was small things, subtle shifts, but they were monumental to a woman starved for attention. I fought it, truly I did. The guilt was a heavy blanket suffocating me. 7 years, a future planned, a ring on my finger. But the emptiness inside me was a chasm, and Leo's kindness felt like a bridge, however fragile, across it. One night, after a particularly grueling week at work and another silent dinner with Mark, I stayed late. Leo was there. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. And then one touch led to another, a desperate, raw yearning for warmth and connection. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness, fueled by profound loneliness and a desperate need to feel alive again. The weeks that followed were a blur of guilt, confusion, and a strange, fragile hope. I tried to pull back from Leo, to refocus on Mark, to fix what was broken, but it felt irreparable. The chasm had grown too wide, and then the nausea started, the exhaustion, the overwhelming certainty that my life, already a tangled mess, was about to become infinitely more complicated. I was pregnant. The world tilted on its axis. Fear and a strange, nascent joy warred within me. I knew deep down this baby was probably Leo's. The timing was all wrong for it to be Mark's. But a part of me, a tiny, foolish part, clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be the catalyst. Maybe this could wake Mark up, remind him of what we had, what we could still be. Maybe this new life could breathe life back into our dying relationship. I gathered every ounce of courage I possessed and called him. 2 months of silence after he'd just stopped talking to me, stopped coming home some nights. 2 months of him disappearing without a trace, leaving me alone in our apartment, clinging to the shards of what we once were. But this was too important. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind with checkered tablecloths and the smell of strong Cuban coffee in the air. My hands trembled as I told him. He looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief, then a cold, calculated anger. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar app. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what he was doing. He started listing dates, counting backward. My due date, the dates, Leo and I. It was undeniable. The numbers didn't lie. The cold, hard truth stared us both in the face. It wasn't his. The air in the cafe grew thick, suffocating. I felt a hot, burning wave of shame and devastation wash over me. All my fragile hope shattered into a million pieces. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the clinking of coffee cups from other tables. He just sat there, staring at the calendar, then at me, his eyes devoid of emotion, a blank slate, my vision blurred. Tears stung my eyes, hot and insistent. I couldn't stay there, not for another second. I pushed my chair back, the scrape of wood against tile echoing in my ears, and stumbled out of the cafe, the Miami heat suddenly oppressive, suffocating. I walked aimlessly, the city's vibrant energy now a cruel mockery of my inner turmoil. I just cried hot, gut-wrenching sobs that tore at my throat. I found myself back at my grandma's house, not knowing how I got there. The comforting scent of her cooking, the familiar warmth of her living room, usually a balm for any wound, now felt alien, suffocating. The phone rang. It was Mark's grandmother, not mine. His grandma, the woman who had always treated me like her own. My stomach clenched. I knew he had told them. Her voice, usually so sweet and full of gentle wisdom, was sharp, laced with venom. She called me irresponsible, a cheat, a slew of other ugly words that felt like daggers to my heart. She accused me of throwing away everything, of betraying Mark, of destroying her grandson's life. Every word was a blow, each accusation a reminder of how completely I had failed, how irrevocably I had messed up. I tried to explain, to tell her about the emptiness, the loneliness, the years of feeling unheard, unseen, but she wasn't listening. Her mind was made up. It was all my fault. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. And then I knew what I had to do. I had to face them, all of them. My family, who I now knew were just as furious, just as judgmental. I drove back to Mark's house, my heart a raw, bleeding wound. His whole family was there, his grandma, his uncles, his aunts, a tribunal. They sat there, stern faces, arms crossed, their gazes like ice. Mark, of course, was there too, looking wounded, innocent, a picture of betrayal. He had painted a masterpiece of me as the villain, and they had bought every brushstroke. I tried to speak, to explain my side, to confess the pain that had led me down that path. I spoke of the 7 years, the slow erosion of our connection, the feeling of being discarded, unwanted. But they cut me off, their voices rising in a crescendo of anger and disappointment. They sided with him completely, unequivocally. They scolded me, each word a condemnation. The lies I had apparently told them, lies I didn't even know I'd told, were unbelievable, even to my own family. My own family, who should have stood by me, had turned their backs. As I walked out of that house, defeated, humiliated, my spirit utterly crushed, Mark started screaming. Insults, accusations, a torrent of rage that followed me out the door, but I paid zero attention to them. His words, his anger, they were just noise. Because in that moment all I felt was a profound, aching disappointment, not just in him or in myself, but in the entire world that had seemed to conspire against me. The sadness was a dull throb, replaced by a cold, searing anger that began to take root deep within my soul. How could a man who claimed to love me, who I had given everything to, stand by and let his family tear me apart? How could 7 years, a lifetime of memories and shared dreams, be thrown away, dismissed in a mere 2 months? I felt numb beyond tears. And the thought, raw and undeniable, began to form in my mind. There had to be a way to make them understand, to make them feel just a fraction of the pain they had inflicted upon me. My brain wouldn't turn off. It was just churning, replaying every insult, every dismissive glance, every word of condemnation. And with each replay, the cold, hard resolve solidified. The humid Miami air, usually a comforting blanket, felt like a suffocating shroud that night. I'm Ava Thompson, 25 years young, or at least I was until my world decided to flip itself inside out. My life before this moment felt like one of those glossy postcards you find in South Beach souvenir shops, bright, vibrant, full of promise. I had a small, thriving business as a freelance graphic designer, turning bland ideas into eye-catching visuals. It was fulfilling, creative, and it paid the bills, allowing me to live in a cozy little apartment just a few blocks from the ocean, where the salty breeze was a constant companion. My days were a mix of client calls, design work, and evenings spent unwinding with a book on my balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance. And then there was Daniel. Daniel was the centerpiece of my postcard-perfect life. We'd been together since high school, 7 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, and a love that felt as deep and endless as the ocean itself. He was my rock, my confidant, the man I pictured building a future with. We had plans, a little house with a garden, maybe a golden retriever, definitely a couple of kids. The engagement ring, a simple platinum band with a small, brilliant diamond, had been on my finger for 6 months, a constant sparkle of our commitment. Every time I looked at it, I felt a warmth spread through me, a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. He was charming, attentive, and incredibly supportive of my dreams. He'd bring me coffee when I pulled all-nighters for a big client, listened patiently to my design woes, and always knew how to make me laugh when I was stressed. Our families loved us together, and our friends saw us as the quintessential forever couple. It truly felt like a fairy tale, albeit one set against the backdrop of bustling Miami. Then the texts started. Innocent at first, a friend of a friend asking about Daniel. Is he okay? Haven't seen him around much. Then more pointed ones. Saw Daniel with someone at that new restaurant downtown, just thought you should know. I brushed them off. Daniel was busy with work, I reasoned. He was a sales manager for a local tech company, and his hours were unpredictable. People saw things misunderstood. I trusted him. We had 7 years of trust. But the nagging feeling, that tiny insidious worm of doubt, burrowed its way in. He started coming home later, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. His phone was always face down, and he'd become strangely secretive about his weekends. My gut screamed, but my heart clung to the familiar comfort of our routine. I made excuses, told myself I was being paranoid, just another stressed-out bride-to-be. I even tried to talk to him gently about the changes. He'd dismiss my concerns with a laugh, pull me into a hug, and tell me I was imagining things. He'd shower me with extra affection for a few days, and I'd convince myself I was indeed overthinking. He was just busy. He loved me. 2 months ago, it all came crashing down. He didn't come home, not that night or the next morning. My calls went straight to voicemail. My texts went unanswered. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I called his work, his friends, his family. No one had seen him since the previous evening. I even called the hospitals, my voice trembling, envisioning the worst. A car accident, a mugging, anything but what I would eventually discover. He reappeared 2 days later, looking disheveled, hollow-eyed, and carrying a suitcase. He didn't offer an explanation, just a mumbled apology about needing space. My heart felt like it had been ripped out and stomped on. We argued, screamed, cried. He finally admitted it. He'd been seeing someone else, for months, a coworker. My world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The engagement ring felt heavy, a mocking weight on my finger. I took it off, placed it on the counter, and told him to leave. He left, and the silence that followed was deafening. I spent weeks in a blur of tears, anger, and utter disbelief. 7 years gone just like that. I tried to pick up the pieces, to put one foot in front of the other. My clients were understanding, my friends rallied around me, bringing food, listening to my endless rehashings of the betrayal. I threw myself into work, into long runs along the beach, anything to keep my mind from replaying the devastating final scene. Slowly, painfully, a numb sort of peace began to settle in. The anger still simmered, but the raw pain had begun to dull. I even started to believe I might actually survive this. Then 2 nights ago, my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. It was Daniel. His voice was hesitant, almost pleading. He wanted to talk, he needed to talk. Against every fiber of my being, against all common sense, I agreed to meet him at a quiet little cafe a few blocks from my apartment. Part of me, the foolish, wounded part, hoped he was coming to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to say it was all a terrible mistake and he wanted me back. The other part, the cynical, newly hardened part, knew better. He walked in looking thinner, older, his usual confident swagger replaced by a nervous fidgeting. He sat across from me, avoiding my gaze, the silence stretched thick with unspoken words. Finally he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Ava, I have something to tell you." My heart pounded. This was it, the grand apology, the desperate plea. I'm pregnant, he blurted out. The words hung in the air, a cruel, impossible joke. My mind struggled to process them. Pregnant, he was a man, what kind of sick game was this? Then the full horror dawned on me. He wasn't pregnant, the other woman was. He was going to be a father. My stomach lurched. "It's not mine," he added quickly, as if that would somehow soften the blow. "But I don't know if it's hers or if it's yours." My breath hitched. The absurdity of it was almost comical if it weren't so devastating. "Mine," I choked out, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Daniel, we haven't been together in 2 months. How could it possibly be mine?" He pulled out his phone, a frantic look in his eyes. "Let's look at the calendar, Ava, just to be sure." My hands were shaking as I watched him scroll through dates, his brow furrowed in concentration. The last time we'd been together, truly together, had been a week before I found out about the affair. We traced the timeline of the pregnancy, the typical gestational period. The numbers didn't lie. There was no overlap. It wasn't mine, it couldn't be. The moment of realization hit him like a physical blow. His face crumpled. The bravado, the nervous energy all drained away, leaving him a pathetic, trembling mess. He put his head in his hands, then looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. It's not yours," he whispered, a fresh wave of tears streaming down his face. "It's hers." He didn't say another word. He just stood up, pushed his chair back, and walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, surrounded by the clinking of coffee cups and the murmur of other conversations, feeling utterly hollowed out. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the news echoing in my empty mind. Pregnant, his affair partner, not mine. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer audacity of it all. It wasn't just that he had cheated. It was that he had dragged me back into his mess, even after I had painstakingly started to heal. I stumbled home, the Miami night air suddenly icy cold against my skin. The apartment felt suffocating. I paced, the anger building, a hot, roaring inferno in my chest. How could a human being do this? How could 7 years of shared history and devotion be thrown away for a 2-month fling that resulted in a pregnancy with another woman? There were no tears left in me, no sadness, just a profound disappointment that gnawed at my soul and a searing, relentless anger. I felt numb, disconnected from my own body. 25 hours passed without sleep, my mind racing, replaying every moment, every lie, every devastating revelation. Then, an hour after Daniel left, my phone rang again. It was Maria, Daniel's grandmother. Maria was a force of nature, a kind, loving woman who had practically raised Daniel after his parents passed away years ago. She had always treated me like her own granddaughter, and her house was a second home to me. My heart sank, she must know. Her voice, usually warm and comforting, was sharp, laced with fury. "Ava Thompson, how could you be so irresponsible? My grandson tells me you are pregnant with his child and you deny it. After all he has given you, all the love. You abandon him when he needs you most." My jaw dropped, the audacity. He had told her I was pregnant with his child and that I was denying it. The lies were piling up, each one more outrageous than the last. The anger solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to let this stand, not now, not after everything. "Maria," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think you have it completely backward. I am not pregnant. Daniel is going to be a father, but the child is not mine. It's his affair partner's." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "What are you saying, child? My Daniel would never." "Maria," I interrupted, my voice gaining strength, "I am coming over right now, and I am going to explain everything, and I suggest you gather the uncles and aunts because they need to hear this too." I hung up before she could respond, my hands still shaking, but with a different kind of energy now. A furious, determined energy. I hailed a cab, the short ride feeling like an eternity. Daniel's family home, a beautiful old house with a sprawling bougainvillea vine, usually felt welcoming. Tonight, it felt like a battlefield. When I walked in, Maria, Daniel's uncles, and his aunts were all gathered in the living room, their faces a mix of confusion, anger, and suspicion. Maria's eyes were still narrowed, her initial fury barely contained. "Ava," she began, "explain yourself." I took a deep breath. This was it. The truth laid bare. I started from the beginning calmly, precisely. I told them about the texts, the late nights, the perfume. I told them about Daniel's sudden disappearance and his eventual confession. I told them about the meeting at the cafe, his shocking revelation, and our calendar check that proved I was not the mother of his child. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I simply stated the facts, letting the raw, ugly truth speak for itself. I watched their faces as the realization dawned on them one by one. The uncles, usually boisterous and jovial, grew silent, their expressions turning grim. The aunts exchanged horrified glances. Maria, who had initially been so ready to condemn me, slowly slumped into her armchair, her initial anger replaced by a profound sadness and disbelief. When I finished, the room was silent. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then one of Daniel's uncles, Uncle Ricardo, a gruff but fair man, cleared his throat. So he told you he was leaving for a break and was actually with another woman, and now he's coming back to you with her pregnancy, trying to pin it on you. His voice was low, dangerous. I simply nodded, my gaze meeting theirs. Maria's eyes were fixed on the floor. The lies, she whispered, her voice barely audible. All this time. Then the scolding began, not for me but for Daniel. His aunts started, their voices rising in a crescendo of indignation. How could he do this to Ava? She was a daughter to us. Such disrespect to his family, to her. Uncle Ricardo joined in, his voice booming. He spun this whole web of deceit even to us, lying about the mother of his child. Unbelievable. They sided with me. They saw the truth, even if it meant confronting the ugly reality of their own kin. It was a small victory, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. I felt a strange mix of validation and exhaustion. I had told my truth and they had believed me. I said my goodbyes, the family's apologies and expressions of sympathy following me to the door. As I stepped out onto the porch, the night air still heavy, a figure emerged from the shadows. Daniel, he must have been waiting. You ruined everything, he shrieked, his voice hoarse with rage. You just had to tell them, didn't you? You always had to be the perfect one, the victim. His face was contorted, his eyes wild. He hurled insult after insult, a torrent of desperate, angry words, but I paid zero attention to them. His words, once capable of piercing my heart, now felt like distant echoes, meaningless sounds against the backdrop of the churning sea within me. The pain was still there, but it was overshadowed by something else, something cold and resolute. Disappointment, yes, and anger, a burning ember that refused to die. But beneath it all, a quiet thought had begun to take root. A seed of an idea, dark and promising. How could a woman do this to a man that loved her and gave her everything? How could a human being throw 7 years down the drain in 2 months? The questions from the Reddit post echoed in my mind. How could he do this to me? And the answer, a chilling whisper, began to form. He couldn't get away with it. Not entirely. Not anymore. The numb exhaustion still clung to me, but it was no longer just the exhaustion of despair. It was the exhaustion that precedes a storm, the quiet before a calculated strike. My brain wasn't turning off. It was just starting to plan. The revenge, a dish best served cold, was just beginning to simmer. The air in Miami had never felt so heavy. Each breath was a struggle, thick with the humidity and the even heavier weight of my own humiliation. My grandmother's house, once a haven of warmth and familiar smells, now felt like a tribunal, every gaze a judgment, every word a gavel striking down my life. They had sided with him, of course. My uncles, my aunts, even my beloved Nana, their faces etched with a disappointment that cut deeper than any insult. They looked at me as if I was a stranger, a liar, a ruin. And maybe in that moment I was. I don't remember walking away from that house, not really. It was a blur of asphalt and the insistent throb behind my eyes. I remember his calm, controlled face as he walked out, his back straight, leaving me there to drown in the shame. The insults I screamed after him were a desperate, guttural cry, not of anger at him, but at myself, at the crumbling edifice of my life. They were ugly words, born of pure, unadulterated pain, meant to hurt him, but mostly meant to make me feel something other than the crushing emptiness. He didn't even flinch. He just kept walking, and with every step he took a piece of my hope with him. I ended up at South Point Park, the waves of the Atlantic crashing against the shore in a rhythmic mockery of my own internal chaos. The salt spray on my face tasted like tears, though I had none left to shed. My eyes were raw, my throat hoarse. 25 hours, he said, 25 hours of no sleep. It felt like an eternity. My mind was a broken record, playing the same agonizing loop. The calendar, the dates, the cold, hard truth that the baby growing inside me was not his. It was the other man's. A cruel irony that the one physical manifestation of my mistake was now utterly undeniable, irrefutable. Numb, that was the word. Not sad, not heartbroken, just a profound, unsettling numbness that had settled deep in my bones. It was as if my brain had indeed switched off, just as he had wished. But it wasn't peaceful. It was a terrifying void, a premonition of a life devoid of joy, purpose, or love. How could I have thrown away 7 years, 7 years of laughter, shared dreams, quiet evenings, the comfortable certainty of us? All of it obliterated in a moment of weakness, a fleeting lapse in judgment. 2 months that had cost me everything. I sat there for hours, watching the massive cruise ships glide out of Port Miami, their decks lit up like floating cities, carrying people to distant, carefree destinations. I wondered if anyone on board was looking back at the city, at the tiny figure on the shore, thinking about the wreckage they left behind. Probably not. Everyone was too busy moving forward. And that's when a tiny flickering spark ignited in the vast emptiness within me. Moving forward. The thought was audacious, almost laughable. How could I move forward when I felt rooted to this spot, burdened by an impossible shame? But the alternative, staying put, letting the bitterness consume me, becoming the ruin my family saw, was far worse. The child inside me stirred, a gentle flutter that was both a reminder of my transgression and a fragile promise of something new. This baby, it was innocent. It deserved a mother who was not consumed by regret, a mother who could stand tall even after falling so spectacularly. Revenge. The word tasted bitter on my tongue, but it wasn't revenge against Mark. He was done with me, and he had every right to be. My revenge had to be against the part of myself that had allowed this to happen, against the despair that threatened to swallow me whole, and against the judgment that sought to define me. My revenge would be to survive, to thrive, to build something beautiful from the ashes. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this was easy. The first step was the hardest. I had to face the reality of my situation head-on. No more hiding, no more pretending. I needed a job, a place to live, and a plan. My savings were meager, barely enough to last a month or two. I was alone in this, truly alone. My family, for now, was a closed door. My friends, well, how do you even begin to explain this to them? The first call I made was to a distant cousin, Sarah, who lived in Orlando. We weren't close, but she was a single mother, tough as nails and fiercely independent. I didn't want to tell her everything, not yet, but I needed a safe place, a temporary refuge to collect my thoughts and start anew. To my surprise, she didn't ask many questions. She just listened, her voice surprisingly gentle when I finally choked out that I was leaving Miami and needed a place to stay for a bit. She offered me her spare room, no questions asked, a small kindness that felt like a lifeline in a turbulent sea. Leaving Miami was like shedding an old skin. Every street corner held a memory of him, of us. The restaurant where he proposed, the park where we had our first picnic, the beach where we watched countless sunsets, each one a fresh wound. But as my little car drove north on the turnpike, the Miami skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror, a strange sense of liberation began to bloom. This wasn't an escape. It was a retreat, a strategic withdrawal. In Orlando, I found a small apartment near Sarah's, a tiny space with just enough room for me and my growing belly. I took a job waiting tables at a diner, the kind of place where no one asked about your past, just your order. It was hard work, long hours on my feet, but the exhaustion was a welcome distraction from the churning in my mind. Each tip was a victory, each paycheck a tangible step towards independence. I started saving every penny, dreaming of a future where I wouldn't have to rely on anyone, where I could provide for my child completely on my own terms. The pregnancy was difficult physically and emotionally. There were days when the morning sickness was relentless, days when the sheer weight of my circumstances felt unbearable. But then I would feel a kick, a gentle nudge, and a fierce protective love would wash over me. This baby, this precious life was my reason, my purpose. It wasn't a punishment, it was a promise. I went to my appointments alone. I decorated the tiny nursery with secondhand finds and handmade touches. I read every book I could find about motherhood. I learned to cook, to budget, to rely on my own resilience. The anger and disappointment didn't vanish overnight, but they transformed. They became fuel to prove to myself and to anyone who doubted me that I was more than my mistakes. When the baby came, a healthy baby girl with a shock of dark hair, a profound peace settled over me. Holding her, I felt a connection to something pure and untainted. Her name was Hope, because that's what she represented. Not a shattered past, but a hopeful future. Mark never contacted me again, and I never reached out to him. My family slowly, tentatively began to reach out. My grandmother sent a small knitted blanket for Hope, a silent apology, a whisper of forgiveness. It was a long road mending those relationships, but I knew it would take time, and I was willing to put in the work. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about tearing someone else down. It was about building myself up, brick by painful brick, into a woman I could be proud of. It was about choosing forgiveness over bitterness, growth over regret. It was about realizing that while I had indeed thrown away 7 years, I had gained something infinitely more valuable: the strength to pick myself up, the wisdom to learn from my mistakes, and the boundless love of a child who made every struggle worth it. I was Ava Thompson, and my story wasn't over. It had just truly begun.